Sip your coffee, morning bright, ideas sparking, coming to light. On the mic, sounding tight, problem solved, day and night. Every day, oh yeah. Modern problem solvers, here's your groove. Step by step, watch us move, feel the beat, take and groove. Modern problem solvers, in the groove, oh yeah.
Welcome to the show. We are the Modern Problem Solvers.
Because modern problems call for modern solutions, and that's why we're here.
So, a little personal life update. We are sitting on the floor. You might have noticed. We ditched our patio furniture kitchen chairs as a result of me reading this book right here, Built to Move. The first chapter is getting up and down off the floor, which is good for you. So we're doing that. We sit on the floor for eating our meals, and we just don't sit on chairs anymore.
It's been an adjustment, but a cool adjustment. It's just good for you.
Yep.
Getting on and off the floor.
And we try to do things that are good for us, as a rule.
We really do. We really do. Which actually leads into the topic of today's podcast, which is self-compassion. We wanted to talk about self-compassion, what we've been doing recently for ourselves to take care of ourselves, forgiving ourselves, and tools that we use.
Where did this idea for this podcast episode come from?
It came from, we were sitting here brainstorming what we thought we were going to talk about, which eventually we will talk about, which is books that have impacted us. And I was sitting here thinking, I can name great books, but I couldn't tell you what it is from the book that impacted me. And it was feeling like a slog and not aligned and like I had nothing to say. And I thought, wait, we don't have to do that. We have complete control over what it is that we talk about on our own podcast. And just because we had a plan doesn't mean we need to stick to the plan. So we pivoted. Now we're talking about self-compassion.
All right. So some of you may be familiar that I am a avid fan of and follower of Tim Ferriss and the Tim Ferriss Show. I share episodes and clips from episodes with Mary so frequently that we created a separate WhatsApp group chat for it. It's called Shared Resources. So the other day I shared with her the most recent episode of Tim Ferriss interviewing Elizabeth Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love, Big Magic, City of Girls. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it so much that when I shared it with her, we listened to it together. I listened to it again on our way to the airport to drop Mary off.
And later that same day, after dropping me off, it came up twice, and then a third time this weekend that I don't think I shared with you yet.
Really?
Yeah. The first time was Facebook memory. 4 years ago, that exact day, I had been reading City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. My mom and I, wandering around Kensington in Calgary, I look in a random bike parked outside a random store. Boom, there it is. City of Girls, Elizabeth Gilbert. And same book was in my room at my mom's house. City of Girls,
Dang.
Elizabeth Gilbert. And that's one of those books that it's so beautifully researched and so beautifully well written. And there's points in it where you feel, oh, and that's the only way I can describe reading it.
All right, I'll add it to my holds.
Like it's
I'll add
so
it to the list.
It's so good but like so awful, and you just feel everything that this character is going through. Beautiful. Elizabeth Gilbert is an incredible writer. But the podcast, that was the most
we're not talking about books today.
Apparently,
we'll get there.
I've got a lot to say about a book. The podcast was fabulous, and I enjoyed listening to it so much and was sharing a bunch of things from this particular episode with my mom. She was so interested by all the things that I was sharing that her and I listened to the majority of it together as well. And there are a couple of things from that podcast that just really speak to self-compassion.
Such as
having boundaries with people who suck energy. So Elizabeth Gilbert talks about how some people are medicine, some people need medicine, and
some people need to be institutionalized.
Yeah, some people need to be institutionalized.
Her words.
Yeah, not our words, because it's all trauma, and we know that everyone's actions are just from their own trauma and their own experiences. not necessarily institutionalized, but perhaps therapy, maybe.
I mean, if an institution offers the proper therapy and support and tools, then and if it's the best place for them to be, then to help them from hurting themselves or others.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Like, obviously, we're condoning the proper tools for the proper people in the proper scenario.
Yeah.
But that was it was a funny line that she threw out. More on the topic of people who are medicine versus people who need medicine, though.
I spent some amazing, wonderful time with my best friend from university. I told her, you are your medicine. Being with her is medicine. Leaving her, I always feel good and uplifted and nourished. And Elizabeth Gilbert talks about how, yeah, some people you leave feeling amazing, like you got medicine. Some people you leave and you feel like they raided your pharmacy and you have nothing left.
Yeah, and you feel like you need to use something to get back to equilibrium, or even just to like get rid of that feeling. You feel sick, and you feel like, you know, I've been in scenarios where I get home and I'm like, and I don't drink. We don't necessarily drink, but I'm like, oh man, I could really use a drink. Maybe you shouldn't have spent time with those people in the first place. Let's go prevention, not supposed cure.
Yeah, absolutely. Just instilling boundaries with the people that drain you and that take from you and give nothing back. Subduing that is a form of self-compassion. It's taking care of yourself, knowing that when you spend time with certain people, it dysregulates you. There's the radical idea, which is very radical, that you just don't spend time with those people, regardless of who they are. Are they friends? Are they immediate family members? You just don't spend time with them. You just choose not to. You instill that boundary. I think Elizabeth Gilbert talks about having not talked to family members for years because they took so much energy from her when she did. Yeah, it's radical. And some people might say that they can't do that. No, but I have to see these family members. You don't.
Nobody's entitled to dysregulate your life, regardless of blood family. And again, we know that's radical. It's the principle in the belief system, whether or not you apply it to whoever it needs applying.
Some people might disagree with that. You might really push back and say, no, but I have to. Everything's a choice. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to go to work.
Yep.
You'll suffer the consequences if you don't, but you don't have to. You are choosing to.
Yeah, there's only consequences. More recently in my life, little update, I got back into the jiu-jitsu scene, back into training, we'll say. It's not necessarily, it's a club and it's a gym, but training is the primary verb. I'm working on my skills, and that includes being welcomed so warmly into an amazing community of martial artists, which seems to be my comfort zone, I guess, even though I'm so insanely sore and I have marks all over my body from the 5 classes that I went to last week. But it just feels so good. And I'm going to 6 a.m. classes before work, rolling into the office being like, yeah, it's awesome. Had such a great class. That's self-compassion for me, even though I come home with bruises and scrapes and my jaw hurts from people trying to choke me. I love it. It's fun. It's a hell of a workout. It's such a supportive community of people just constantly trying to get better at this one particular skill. That's been the most recent shift for me as far as like finding something that really fills my cup. Because I trained for a few months back in like 2018, 2019, and then had to quit due to financial reasons. But it feels so good to be back, and I'm almost kicking myself for not doing it sooner. If I were to offer any sort of advice, it's like find something that really fills your cup and makes you feel like awesome after you've done it, and just do it. Just cut the excuses, find the way to make it happen, and do it. Another great reminder that Mary has been helping me with is to forgive myself. I have a pervasive habit of blaming and shaming myself into submission, quite literally, and no pun intended going back to jujitsu, when I mess something up, especially in the kitchen for some reason. If I'm making a meal, especially for her, this weekend I didn't have any issues because I was just cooking for me, and frankly, I went the easy way out in a lot of cases. But when I'm making food for Mary and I mess something up, I just go shame spiral so hard, like it's as if the world has ended and I'll never do anything okay again. The meal might as well be thrown in the garbage. It's bad. And this morning when I was making some pumpkin flavored pancakes for her, I forgot to grease the pan and things were sticking. And anybody who's made pancakes and had them stick to the pan can attest that is a nightmare. And I I noticed it, and Mary reminded me of it, and she tried to help derail the shame train as it cruised along down the path of my cerebellum. I got off the track faster than I normally do, and sometimes I let it totally upend my whole morning, and I'm in a miserable mood for a lot longer than is necessary. Having somebody to remind me that I'm not the worst human to ever exist because I couldn't flip a couple pancakes, as stupid as that sounds, that's where your brain goes, that's where my brain goes, is so helpful. And so I'm very grateful for you.
Thanks.
Keeping me from flagellating myself more than I do as a basic reflex.
Yeah. And it's my pleasure to help you with that in this area of growth for you, because it's very ingrained. I think it's going to take work to get rid of those old patterns and to not default to shame when that happens, but default to, oh,
yeah,
yeah,
this is how silly, like with a little bit of hindsight, you're such a good example of this. This is going to be something I'm going to laugh about perspective, because with any amount of time, comedy is tragedy plus time. For the most part, you can look back in time and at any experience and find the humor in it. In the moment, it's a lot harder to be able to bring that hindsight into the present and realize that this seemingly travesty doesn't need to be all that serious, and that we have the ability to augment our frame of mind and reframe things and just make it okay. It's a helpful tool for me, I've found.
totally. And ongoing, which is great.
Yeah.
We're human.
Yeah.
We're so human. We're just doing our best.
Yeah. And the more you habitually work with these sorts of tools, the more reflexive they'll become.
Yeah.
Right? So the next time I flip a pancake and go, shit, it didn't flip right, I can go, oh, the last time it worked out fine, and Mary enjoyed her little mangled pancake bites. So it's fine.
It really did. They were really good.
Dump maple syrup on them, man, anything will taste fine.
Absolutely. Something else that has just come up recently, and I like talking about the recent examples because I feel like they're fresh, and again, we're so human and just working on figuring out this crazy weird world and consciousness and bodies. It's a lot. We're continually using our guiding principle, which we talked about back in episode 2, of what feels the most like self-respect.
Yeah.
When it comes to social engagements recently for you.
Yep.
When it comes to just next actions and what I want to focus on.
Only self-respect.
Only self-respect for the rest of the day. And again, that doesn't necessarily jive with like self-care, because self-care can swing really far into the indulgence and no longer be good for you. And self-respect, I find it keeps us facing true north as to what is actually best for us in this moment.
Yeah.
And it gives room for, maybe it's rest, maybe it's a nap, maybe it's
recording episode 4 of your podcast.
Even though I really didn't
She didn't want to do it.
I did not want to do it.
And we've been putting it off, and she had this phenomenal moment of, when is it ever going to be the right time? We are like way ahead of schedule today somehow. Probably because I had to be up at 6:30 to come pick you up from the airport.
Totally.
We're so ahead of schedule. Why not today? And so even though it might not be something that she wanted to do or something that she would think fits into that restful category of self-care, recording this episode and having it done feels like self-respect, because we did it, because you can pat yourself on the back having done something that you've been wanting to do but put off.
You said this earlier today, actually. What professionals know that amateurs don't is that sometimes sitting down to do the work is harder than the actual work. I think you said it specifically to writing.
Mm-hmm.
But even with this, it's, when am I going to feel like it's the right time? Inspiration and motivation are fleeting. And so sometimes you just force yourself to do it. You force yourself to go to the gym. You force yourself to read the book. You force yourself to write the email, to write the blog post. You force yourself to record the episode. You just do it. And then you feel great because you did it.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards you can go, yeah, I did that thing. And you put a check mark in the identity that you're creating for yourself. And our identity is kick-ass, badass, inspirational leaders in the freaking world. We're going to make a difference. Darn it.
For me, self-respect has been this week recovering from the jiu-jitsu lessons. I'm not typically like a bath person. I find them very indulgent. They're very time consuming. But this weekend, I have had to have a lot of hot baths to repair my sore ass muscles. And I've prioritized going to the sauna and the hot tub at the rec center that we live nearby, because I needed it, because I've been exerting myself a lot at these jiu-jitsu classes. They're a freaking workout. So that's been my expression of self-respect, recovering, doing the things that help my body get back into position. Because we're training for a half marathon. And I will just tell you, after a week of jiu-jitsu classes, it's totally contraindicated for running and training for a race. My hips are so tight. It's insane. We'll balance it and work towards that half marathon goal. But if you have questions about books, we've got a lot on our bookshelf. We're going to be talking about them the next episode, probably. We'd love to field your questions about books and answer them on the podcast. Let us know, and we'll share some of our highlights, our top picks for what has radically transformed our life or reframed our perspective, lessons learned, and that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for taking the time out of your day to watch/listen. We hope it was helpful and gave you something to think about.
Have a fabulous rest of your day.
See you next time.